Welcome back to Making Money Matter, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Kerry Stevenson, and today I've got an extra special guest for you. If you don't know who this is, you've been living under a rock. His name is Stewart McDonald. He's the founder and the principal of Vertical Events, which also trades under the name of RIU. He's a Kalgoorlie boy. Now, I've known Stewie for quite some time. What he doesn't know about resources isn't worth knowing. They also do a techno event. But why have I got Stewart on the program? Number of reasons. One, he's also an investor. Two, he knows the sector extremely well. But thirdly, most importantly, in less than 2 weeks' time, we're all going to be heading over to Fremantle, the good old Freo, and going and joining his Explorers Conference. This is one of the largest events of the calendar year. A lot of companies, Stu, a lot of companies. I looked at the program today and went, holy moly, there's everyone from Alto to Dreadnought to Hastings to Antipa. You've got the golds, you've got the nickels, you've got the rare earths, you've got gold. Thank goodness, because you know me, I'm that gold lady. But listen, welcome to Making Money Matter. First time with me. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Kerry, and it's nice to be on your show at last.
Well, sorry it took so long, Stu, but I haven't been going for that long, as you know. Quick question first up. I just want to go into a little bit of who are you? I just said before, you're a Kalgoorlie boy, good old Kalgoorlie boy. Tell us a little bit about your background, because I'm talking to you, you're now in Perth. I'd like to know, and we'd like to know a little bit about your background, how you got into running these fantastic programs that you run.
Well, it all started in my upbringing, which was on a sheep station out of Kalgoorlie, and School of the Air and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, wow.
And then moved into Kalgoorlie, where North Cal Primary School, Eastern Goldfields High School. I finished school on a Thursday, my exams, and on the Friday I started working underground at the mines in Kalgoorlie, Mount Charlotte, the famous Mount Charlotte at the top of Hannah Street. And that's where my dad worked.
Oh,
and so I got a job there as a labourer, underground labourer, and then progressed to the Golden Mile, worked on Lakeview and Perseverance Shaft, again underground, ended up on the mill and then on the stores. And it's from the stores that I was lucky enough to have a boss that said to me, you're wasting your time here. You need to get on a plane and get yourself down to Perth and get an education. He said, because you're better than being a storeman. So that's what I did. So I came down to Perth and got myself educated and started my business life.
Isn't it interesting, because, you know, the fact that you were in Kalgoorlie, it sort of naturally led you into, I guess, going underground and understanding a little bit about mining. Could have all been different if you'd, I don't know, lived in Sydney or grown up in New Zealand. Do you know what I mean? I think environment.
Yeah, no, it's in your blood. I mean, in the early days of Kalgoorlie, some people may have a recollection of all the slime dumps that were there, and we used to play on them, ride our bikes, slide down them in bits of tin, and have all sorts of fun. And that's what you did up there. You made your own fun, you made your own amusement, but it was all based around mining. The whole town was mining, of course.
Okay, so you know, this smart dude turned around and said, "You're not going to be a storeman. Go down to Perth, get yourself an education." What'd you do?
Well, I did a Bachelor of Business. I majored in accounting and minored in law. So, and I found out pretty quickly that was all pretty boring. But when I finished that led me to my first jobs in the accounting field. And I worked for a company called MG Kalis, which is a big famous fishing name here in Western Australia. And after 3 years of that, I got a tap on the shoulder by someone that you may have heard of called Ron Manners from Croesus Mining. And Ron said, "You want to come back to Kalgoorlie for a few years and join me at Croesus Mining and be my company secretary and CFO." So Ron invited me back into the mining game. So I went back to Cal for a few years and did all that. And that got me into the stock market and the ASX and all those things that we take for granted today. But that's how it all started. That got me into that mold.
Did you start investing at that point, Stu? You say you got me into.
Yes, I was investing earlier than that, because I I was part of the 87 crash, and of course, back in those days, when you invested, your trading terms were T plus 30, not T plus 2, and you never opened your envelopes. You just stuck them in a corner, and you never paid a bill because you bought and sold and bought and sold and bought and sold. And when the crash came, we had to work out what we were owed or what we owed. And of course, we owed, and so that got me into investing, I guess. So I learned pretty quickly that there are ups and downs on the ASX and investing. The 87 crash, not much bigger than that.
What lessons did you learn from that 87 crash? Still a young fella then, you're working, you're in accounting, you understand numbers clearly. But what did that, because we know that these things can come around again. It's been a bit turbulent lately. I'm not saying that we're going to have a crash. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, not financial advice, just having a conversation, do your own homework. But what, if anything, did you learn from that time, Stu?
Oh, what I learned was when you're young and you hang around different people, he said that, she said that, taxi driver gave you a tip. Well, you bought everything. You didn't do any research.
Right.
So what it taught me to do was do research. Okay. And it taught me not so much on the asset of the company, but who's behind the company, who are the people of the company.
Mm-hmm.
And if you knew and trusted the people of the company and they had a good track record, then there was a reasonable chance that would flow over into the quality of their asset. If they were a bit dodgy and part of the fast track mine, it's probably all a bit flimsy. So, I learned to avoid those, and I learned to stay with the ones that had a track record. So investing in people became my motto rather than investing in the asset.
Interesting, because I guess you can have the best asset in the world, but if it's with dodgy people, it's never going to get anywhere regardless.
Well, yeah. And I also learned through guys like Ron Manners and Mick Kalis from the fishing. They were both pioneers in their field, and they were both risk takers. So I got a little bit of risk taking out of both of them, and that's flowed through into me, as you know.
Yeah.
Because I'm very entrepreneurial, and that's what I do. And I learnt that from them. If you don't have a go, you're never going to make it. You just have to have a go sensibly.
Yeah. And doing research. So I guess that leads me nicely into, because we introduce you as the principal and founder of Vertical Events and the RAUs. And what I want to know is, because of your investing and because of wanting to get to know people, did that naturally lead you to say, do you know what, I'll just bring them all together and run a conference?
Well, it did, yeah. And when I left Kalgoorlie, I had to come back to Perth for family reasons. I had to start afresh, and I started my own accounting, bookkeeping type consultancy service. But then through my time in Kalgoorlie, we met and learned to understand Ross Lothian, the great Ross Lothian, the great journalist.
Fabulous.
And so then, through Ron Manners' help and others, I ended up being the accountant and the CFO for Lothian Publishing. So of course that got me back into that field, dealing with all the companies, learning about their stories. And one of the things that Ross did at the start of his career was he ran a nickel conference and a diamond conference. This is, I'm talking 80, 95, 96 here. But Ross was never one for the conferences. He liked the journalism and the magazines, which of course, as we know, same with RIU, they all, time went by and the internet took over, and the magazines and all the big books, Register of Australian Mining and all those big Bibles.
Yep.
They're all gone. But what was left was the feeling and the flavour of running conferences. So I took to that, and it just grew from there.
So how important is it? And I'm telling our audience out there, Stu, that a lot of investors that listen to what we're saying. We've just had a chat with Rick Rule, who also runs a conference over in Florida in July. How important do you think it is from an investor point of view? You mentioned research before, but also turning up to sort of face-to-face to gatherings, I guess, because as humans, we're naturally, we like to communicate. We're social animals. How important do you think it is from an investor's point of view?
Well, it depends on which type you are. And I'll wind the clock forward to now, to
Okay.
2023 or 24 time. And the investors fall into two categories. They fall into real investors and virtual investors. Now, the virtual investor has grown over the past 4 or 5 years on Comsex. Yeah, it's called fast money. There's batches of them. They all pile into a stock. They trade all the time. And they sort of artificially move stocks up and down depending on their buying and selling patterns. They have no research. They don't even know what the product is. They wouldn't know what the company does.
Wow.
All they know is that they're investing in that stock code on that day for 3 days, because that's what their groups are telling them. And you often see it now. You see it on the specky end of our industry, Kez, where a stock might move from 20 cents to 60 or 70 cents in a day on no news.
Yeah.
I know, I've been there. And it comes back down as fast. And that's nothing to do with the asset, nothing to do with the announcement. There's no announcement. It's to do with these guys deciding that that's going to be their stock they're going to rump and pump on that day. Unfortunately, the ASX miles behind, ASIC further behind. They'll never get caught. But then you go back to the real investor, which is where the real money is. And the real investor invests because he wants to make a profit. And he does his research. He turns up at our events, your events. She, a lot of she's these days. Don't worry about that.
I know.
A very, very big portion of investors are females, and they are sticklers for the research, and they are sticklers for walking up to the booth, looking the MD in the eye, asking him the questions. What's your salary? Well, I want to know what your salary is. Are you paying yourself 400 grand a year? If you are, I'm not investing in your company.
Have you heard them say that? Have you?
Yeah, and they go to the next booth. So the MDs and the people running, they're going to be on the ball. They're going to be, and now through shows like yours and others and different media outlets, there's a lot of information available for people to read and understand. Like yesterday in Perth, I went to the benchmark show.
Oh, did you?
And it was a packed room, and the benchmark guys are pretty savvy. They're educated. They give you their view. It's only their view of where it's at, where it's going. And the room was half full of investors who wanted to know where the lithium price is going, where the rare earth price is going, where the gold price is going.
Can you put me out of my misery and tell me give us a couple of little highlights from that?
The biggest highlight was, if you're going to make money in 2024, the only industry to be in is oil and gas.
Wow.
Fossil fuel, oil and gas. That's the only one going up. So the rest of us just have to play in the market that's not going up, because they can't see any stock, any industry sector going up this year. It's all flatlining. Not down. It's not panic by any means, but they can't see lithium prices going up more than 5 or 10%. They can't see gold going up more than 5 or 10%. This is all copper. They think, it's about where it is. Nickel's been oversold. Nickel may move a little bit, but they said there's that much supply out there at the moment. And until that supply is run through, then these critical minerals, gold's different, of course, as you know, because it's not supply and demand. It's a currency, but
it's money. It's not a currency. It's money.
It's money. So you walk away from that going, okay, so I've got to be a little bit careful about if I want to invest in a critical mineral, because of supply concerns, or big mines coming on in Africa that affects the supply dump.
Yeah.
So it's those sort of factors which you have to take into account when you're building a stock portfolio.
And you're still very much an investor as well, Stewart. I mean, are you sort of saying, look, because again, speaking to Rick Rawle, he said, expiration's on the nose. I'm back in the expiration game, and my checkbook is open. Is that the way you look at it as well? Because
yep.
He's a contrarian investor, so he's like, when everybody else is turning left, I go right. So when everyone else is scared, I pile in. Is that how you're feeling?
Well, as you know, Kez, a couple of years ago, 5 years ago now, when nickel was crunched and lithium wasn't a thing, I went and bought some nickel and lithium assets privately. And as you know, we floated those in a couple of years ago. But we're not backing away from lithium. I've got the full team out there. And we've got a whole year planned of drilling. So we're just going to drill it and get results out. Let the market take care of itself.
And as you said before, Stewart McDonald is a little bit of a risk taker, because otherwise you might as well just sit in your house in a white picket fence and do nothing. And it's much more exciting to be a little bit of a risk taker and to go out there and to give it a go at the end of the day.
Well, when we started the first RIU Explorers Conference,
which was
2002,
right?
And yeah, Diggers and Dealers was the only event. I think the Australian Gold Conference had crushed by then, gone. There was no other event. So I just said, oh, okay, well, let's give it a go. And we started modestly and with RIU. And then here we are 20-something years later. And it's, I'm looking in the revision mirror now. Who's behind me? Because there's no one in front of me.
So why did you decide to do it? Why back in 2002? What made you turn around and say, actually, I'm going to run a conference? Because you weren't a conference organizer. Did you just say?
No, I'm an accountant by trade. I guess it's the upbringing, it's your blood, it's the early days of the Lothian and seeing what could happen.
Right.
Seeing what Diggers did. I guess my biggest driver was Diggers, and all hail Diggers. I mean, it's the great show. I saw them sitting in Kalgoorlie going, well, why can't this be done somewhere else? And you had to find your niche, and
why
I stuck with the smaller end. Why Freo?
Yeah.
Because, again, it was a risk, but it was my observation that to get a successful conference, you need to have brokers and investors coming along. Otherwise, the companies won't come.
Yep.
If you have it in the city of Perth, you get the brokers along on the first phone call and they're back to their office. So you lose half of them.
Yeah.
The success of Diggers is that it's 400 miles from Perth. So once you're there, you're there. You can't come home in 5 minutes. So I thought, well, Freo is probably it's 40 minutes back to Perth. So the company's made in the early days, they made a commitment to go for half a day, and then after time it became a full day, and then it stuck, and then So that was my initial thinking, as to how do I get them not to go back to their office after 5 minutes.
And then, ladies and gentlemen, he threw drinks on in the afternoon, going into the evening, and then there's parties and there's all the rest of it. So they're now there. All right, Stu. I think it's fascinating how you started, but look, let's get into the nitty gritty, if you wouldn't mind. For those that are listening, you can go and download the program at verticalevents.com.au. Look for Explorers Conference. The dates are 13, 14, 15th of February. Give us some of the highlights of this year's event, because it's a really packed program.
Well, I guess the main highlight of our event from an industry point of view is the start of the conference. We do the Craig Oliver Award.
Oh, that's
and for those who aren't familiar, Craig Oliver was the employee of Western Areas, and as his main job, and they were all and on the board of Sundance, and of course the Sundance plane went down in Africa and they all died. Craig Oliver was married to the Jones family. And the Jones family were very big in mining, and their station, Hampton Hill Station, was 2 stations away from ours. So a very strong bond between myself and the Jones family, and Craig's wife. So I said, well, it's my conference, why not? So we started the Craig Oliver Award.
Nice.
And that's been going since 2011. And that's a highlight early. And then it goes into the, your talks by Canaccord and ANZ Bank, and then the companies start. And we have smaller companies, bigger companies. We have a whole gold session this year. With some of the major players. We've even got BHP and Rio Tinto along. But
wow.
But they have to talk about exploration. They can't talk about the disclaimer page.
Fantastic.
So their brief is they can't put a corporate guy on stage. They have to put their exploration manager on stage and talk about what they're doing in exploration, which is what the audience want to hear.
Yeah.
Are
they? Do you know? I can't remember if they're first or second day. Probably. I don't know.
Second day, I think. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yep.
So it's scattered all through. Jackson Crabb, who you know is my right-hand man, and puts all the programs together. he's very skilled now in the flow of the program.
Yep.
When you can't bunch all your big ones together on the first day, because then no one will come the rest of the show. So you scatter them all through. You scatter them all through the event.
I reckon you'd run a pretty good show. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going over to Freo. I'll be at the event for all 3 days. I'd love to see lots of you over there as well, because, you know, we've all been through the COVIDs. We've been through a bit of a lockdown period. We're back better than ever. And, you know, yes, I ran the Gold Conference last year, but there is nothing better than starting the year off, meeting other investors and talking the talk with people and trying to find out what their views are on things, because that's how you're going to find out about what's going on. And as Stewie said earlier, go up to the booth and say, how much do you pay yourself? Love that.
Well, it's a good sign, isn't it? Good start.
Yep.
The MD has to be on his toes.
Yeah, and a lot of the MDs are there. And look, before we wrap this up, Stu, you mentioned Benchmark before, oil and gas. Do you have some oil and gas companies coming to Explorers?
No, it's strictly a mining show.
Strictly a mining show. All right.
But of course, we do the RIU Good Oil Conference every year in September, and that's been going since 2001.
There you go, through the ups and downs.
And it hasn't dropped off. So that's still the oil event to go to in terms of ASX companies.
And finally, just quickly, again, I'm going to ask you for 3 things that you think people should be doing right now. But before I do, you've also got an event up in Singapore. Why Singapore? A lot of people go to Hong Kong, but Singapore.
Well, Hong Kong is now no longer the Mines and Money show that used to be up there. Great show again.
Yeah.
But that all collapsed over some shareholding issues with the owners, and then COVID hit. So Mines and Money is no longer. A lot of reasons, for control reasons, and they've moved to Singapore. So a lot of the new investing money is in Singapore.
Okay.
Tribeca, which is a global fund, big fund, they're my partner in the event. I couldn't do it without them, obviously, because I don't know anything about it. But Singapore's seen as a neutral venue.
Yeah, okay.
So the Americans will go to Singapore. The Chinese will go to Singapore. Chinese won't come to Australia. Chinese won't go to America, but they'll go to Singapore.
They won't come to Australia now?
Not generally, no.
Okay.
We're not flavour of the month. So you get a good ASEAN feel for what is happening in the minerals industry. Even though Singapore doesn't have any minerals or any mining, it's a financial hub.
Yeah, it is.
So all the traders, all the miners, they all like to be where the money is. And at the moment, that's where the money is. Lots of it.
Wow. And there is lots of money floating around at the moment. It's going to be an interesting year ahead of us, Stewie. I like to wrap these things up by asking 3 things that you might do if, or not, it's not advice, but give us 3 things that you think people should be doing right now as we head into 2024. Interesting times ahead.
In terms of investing?
Yeah, well, we're not, it's not financial advice per se, but what would you be doing right now?
I'd be networking, I'd be talking, I'd be listening more than talking. Finding, just trying to get to as many people as I can to get some opinions, and then form your own opinion from that knowledge base.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be rushing into any new venture or anything right at this minute. I think we've got a month or 2 yet of a little bit of pain before the new dawn. But I think when the new dawn comes, I think it's going to be a pretty interesting time. So, so steady as she goes. Don't rock the boat, but watch and learn. That would be my watch and learn.
And I think that's extremely good advice. And as I often say to all of you out there, stop watching Netflix and start getting yourself educated. And one of the ways that you can do that, going to events. And of course, the Gold Conference is coming up in not until August. So Stewie's is coming up in less than 2 weeks. I personally think it is one of the best ones on the calendar. So I'd love to see as many of you over there as possible. So go to verticalevents.com.au, sign up, register. And when you do, drop me a note. Say, I'll see you over there in Fremantle. But for now, Stewart McDonald, done a fantastic job putting all that together. And your team, of course. Good on you, Jackson Crabb, for putting it all together and dealing with managing all of these different people, but we look forward to seeing you all over in Freo. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks very much, Kerry. Thanks for your time.